thewellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives. This is Up for a Chat with Cindy O'Meara, Karen Smith, and Kim Morrison.
Here we are, up for a chat about the hottest topics that are important to you, inspiring you to awaken the change within. I'm Karen Smith.
I'm Kim Morrison.
And I'm Cindy O'Meara.
And today's podcast, wow, oh my goodness. Listeners, strap yourselves in, especially if you're Australian, but you are in for such a treat as we welcome the amazing Karma Trudgen to the show. Now, if you guys haven't heard of Karma, you probably have heard of the amazing Helen Patteran, who is a huge friend of all of ours. And Helen has suggested that we interview Karma. And as we've done research on this wonderful woman, we discover that she is working in Indigenous communities in northeastern Arnhem Land. And I don't even want to go any further than that because I really want to know everything about what you're doing, how this came about, and who are you? Karma, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Tell us a little bit about your background. Tell us a little bit about how you came to do the work that you're doing right now.
Sure. So I completed a medical degree, was actually my my humble beginnings. And I was working in Darwin at the Aboriginal Medical Centre there, and my husband was doing some consultancy work in Arnhem Land, and we both decided to leave our jobs and head off to Arnhem Land to be available on the ground. So we moved to Elcho Island, which is a little island in the middle of northeast Arnhem Land, which is the northeast corner of the Northern Territory. And our objective was to make ourselves available for the things that people were trying to do for themselves. So the things that were, motivated from inside, and young people of northeast Arnhem Land are just tremendously disempowered, and there's so many obstacles to them achieving the things that they're trying to do for themselves to turn their communities around. And so we just wanted to make ourselves available as a resource. We've learnt the language and, spent a lot of time trying to understand the worldview and frameworks that people are coming from. And really wanted to be that human resource alongside people breaking down barriers. So we were doing that for a number of years and kind of weren't expecting to be developing anything in the framework of nutrition. And we had a beautiful encounter of being able to share, I guess, what had unfolded in our personal life with the community that we were working with. So we'd been on a big journey ourselves in terms of nutrition. I'd very much started in the kind of dominant paradigm of nutrition and had been eating low fat for a really long time and considered myself to be pretty healthy. And we then had a really heartbreaking journey where we lost our first son to a preterm labour, and we then had a lot of trouble getting through another pregnancy. So we were living in Arnhem Land doing this amazing work amongst this traditional culture, and in our personal life that was what we were struggling away with. And it was years of trying to find anything that we could do within those things that are within your power to influence your fertility. And we were really blessed to be introduced to the work of Weston A. Price, which was obviously a really powerful thing to be introduced to in the context that we were living in, because it wasn't very hard to test the theories that he was talking about, because it's kind of still a living reality that's being played out in Arnhem Land, that we had a traditional culture that were vibrantly healthy, eating all the abundance that nature provided to them, and then had those modern displacing foods come in with the catastrophic health effects. And that was a very easy, a story that's held very closely and still within living memory of the people there. And one of the most startling things that, obviously Weston A. Price's work that was countercultural was its opinion on fat. And it was, again, something so easy to test because in terms of Yolngu traditional culture, they fat so highly. It's kind of the thing that dictates the whole calendar of hunting and gathering, that you wait for the season when the animal is at its fattest in order to hunt it. And there's signs in nature all around that people are attuned to, that particular flowers in bloom indicate that particular things are going to be fat. Like there's particular flowers that indicate when stingray is going to be at its fattest, and therefore you go hunting for stingray and things like that. So we, it was a beautiful context for us to be embracing that story. And we completely changed the way that we ate. And obviously in the context of that just grew more and more respect for traditional cultures and the frameworks that they hold. And I guess we didn't expect our nutrition story to go any further than that. It was a beautiful blessing for us. We have 2 beautiful little boys now, and it was a life-changing journey for us that we didn't expect to be sharing with anyone else. But in that context we were in, we were surrounded by a just debilitating disease that was just impinging on every aspect of life. So we were there alongside people trying to do positive things in their community, but we were constantly being sideswiped by sickness and death and constant funerals, and the constant grief and trauma of that, and just everybody being so debilitated by ill health, and nobody seeing any connection between the state of their health and what they were eating. And it kind of makes sense in one way that, traditionally speaking, food was something that was good. You enjoyed the abundance of nature that was provided in its season. It was amazing to see that once people could experience the difference in eating good food, that they were able to make different choices in their life. So we discovered the power of experiential education, actually being able to give someone an experience of what it feels like to eat differently, and the power and the impact that has on your body. And secondly, the power of returning people to a framework of nutrition that makes sense to them culturally. So able to reconnect people with the framework of the traditional diet. That was kind of the beginnings of Hope for Health. We basically had a growing demand in the community in response to what they were seeing with our good friend Diane. So we fundraised and took a group of Yolngu ladies to an established health retreat down south so that they could get a taste of how we could do a similar model in the NT. And then we fundraised again and pioneered a retreat in Arnhem Land, which is what was captured in the documentary The Magic Pill. It's been an amazing journey of giving people the gift of this experience where they I guess it's more than just an experience about the power of nutrition, because we're talking about a population that's thoroughly disempowered. And I guess, the poison of that is that you don't really believe in your ability to impact your own world, let alone anyone else's. And so to give people an experience that shows them that choices that they make and are in control of impact their well-being is just a really empowering experience, let alone when in that context we can validate their traditional diets and roots in that. It's just a really beautiful process. And I guess that's just the beginning then, is to then be on that journey with people and how you make positive lifestyle change in complex situations like remote communities.
Karma, I want to ask you something. I just want to go back a little bit.
Sure.
As a New Zealander, I come from the land where the Maoris were seen and are seen as warriors, and you can see that in our haka, and you can see that in the way that we have what we call a very strong connection to the mana of the land and the people. And yes, there's problems in New Zealand, and by no means is it perfect. And every New Zealand Day, there's always issues and things like that. As a New Zealander living in Australia, I have to say I've been a bit horrified at the way the Aboriginal culture has not been embraced in the way that we were brought up. Can you tell us, I mean, my view is that, yes, the New Zealand Maoris, our Indigenous culture, were warriors. I look at the Aboriginals as wanderers with an incredible innate intelligence around the land, the people, the planet, the animals, the plants. Why, you've said it a number of times, how they've been oppressed and they're not allowed to flourish in their culture. What on earth has happened in your viewpoint? And what, with what you're doing, is helping a small amount? Can this be replicated around the country?
Yeah, absolutely. That's an awesome question. I think disempowerment is really at the heart of things, and thankfully that doesn't seem to be as dominant part of the story in places like New Zealand. I think the picture that people have been given of Indigenous culture is thoroughly inaccurate. All the descriptors that we use are things like hunter-gatherers and nomadic, and they're things that imply a really primitive culture, and it's just so far from the truth. These people were amazingly sophisticated people who had incredibly complex, beautiful structures that led to societies that were really thriving and functional. And they were in terms of food particularly, they were certainly not roaming around just kind of wandering and stumbling upon food. There were very clear estates with very clear jurisdictions, and people moved about on them according to the seasons, and they definitely propagated foods and made sure that they used resources in a way that meant they were going to still be there the next year. And there were very clear laws in place in that regard. So it was very sophisticated farming that was going on, as opposed to the way we come in and, annihilate a landscape and replace it with a particular crop. So very sophisticated culture, and very much a similar picture of warriors. My father-in-law has written a book about Arnhem Land called Why Warriors Lie Down and Die, and that's exactly the picture that it's so accurate, that we're talking about strong, vibrant warriors who have been disempowered to the point where they are lying down and giving up, and that's a horrific, heartbreaking thing to see going on. But definitely the reality. I guess Arnhem Land has a slightly different history to other areas of Australia in one sense, because it's the area of land that the local people were actually able to defend against, the encroaching dominant culture people, pastoralists and the like, and there was wars that went on, and the Yolngu people were actually able to successfully defeat their land. But as a result of that, the government decided to turn that area into a reserve, and so the land was given back to the Yolngu people, but it's held in trust by land councils. And there's been just an incredibly complex clashing of the two cultures that has gone on there. So, Yolngu people used to have a very sophisticated, vibrant economy, for instance, and, that included international trade, and that's most famously with the Macassans. But all of those frameworks got cut across when the dominant culture kind of landed. So, their trade routes were cut off by different sanctions and things from Darwin, once Darwin was being settled. And so, economically things were closed down, and all of these messages came in that were basically saying the way you have been doing things is wrong and primitive. There's a new way, a superior way that we're bringing in. And, it seemed that the dominant culture had all the power and the resources. So it's very easy to believe that message. And I guess when welfare was brought in, it was kind of the last straw, because it's really the thing that takes away someone's dignity, where they're no longer having to, you know, work to provide. There's a beautiful concept in the Yolngu language called ma, which is your inner spiritual power. And it's actually a term that's used even in terms of economics. So if you trade with somebody, if you give something to somebody, that means you're ma miri, you possess ma, because you've given this thing. If that person doesn't reciprocate, they become ma miru, without that inner spiritual power. And I just find that such a powerful thing, because I think it's so true. That's kind of what welfare has done, that people are receiving without reciprocating, and it leaves them without inner spiritual power. And it's a really debilitating thing. A major factor that has led to so much of this clash and disempowerment is the lack of acknowledgement of the local language and the local, I guess, cultural concepts and frameworks. So people the Yolngu language has not been thoroughly mapped. There are not dictionaries that people can use to access and understand all the new words and ways that have been brought in that are now dictating what goes on their land. So people are basically in an information void and not able to, I guess, navigate how to get through that without information. And that information needs to be actually in their languages with their traditional knowledge, because all of the terms are there, all of the concepts are there for all of the things that we think of society. They are all there in the Yolngu language. But it's really easy, for instance, to, you know, when you live in a community where all of the houses are government housing now, people have become completely dependent on government housing, and that, you know, they're not given a background story that explains that, well, actually all the dominant culture people, you know, in mainstream communities, the majority of those houses are private houses, and people are actually going into significant debt that they are working for, you know, most of their life in order to pay off that house. From their vantage point, all they're seeing is the government must like them better because they're giving them nicer houses than what they're giving to us. And there's just so many layers of complexity that need to be unpacked, because there's just not the information there for Yolngu to navigate this new world that just descended on them. And I guess the food and nutrition is a really tangible example of that the framework that people were in was not the right one to engage with these new modern foods, and the whole paradigm of that's around that in terms of commercialism and advertising and all of those things. They're all so new, and people are having to navigate all of that in such a shorter time frame compared to the time frame we had. It leaves people really disempowered, and it's been such a gift, this pathway that has unfolded with Hope for Health, where we can kind of break that cycle in a sense by taking people out to, you know, a context where they can be immersed in a different way, and a way that's just building on the foundation of what their traditional knowledge is and validating that they don't need to be somebody else and do things differently in order to be healthy. They knew how to do that all along, and we actually need to be learning from them how that was being done. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to break that cycle, validate that knowledge, and start building bridges in that over to the modern context. How do we apply those same principles that are within your traditional framework when you're in the shop? So it's not that you have to go back to living the way that you used to live. It's that you need to bring those principles with you so that you can make choices now in the new context that you find yourself in. And I guess, you know, answer to your question, we absolutely want to make this replicable. And I guess more than that, we want to be building on it. So we want to continue to be delivering the retreats that we are for Indigenous people, and we have so much demand from other communities. So we really want to be able to expand to meet that demand. And we're also really excited that this year we're, you know, partnering with amazing Helen Padron to launch our Together retreats, which is the first time we're kind of making our work available to dominant culture people. So I guess along the pathway it's certainly something that I've experienced personally, that the opportunity to be amongst Yolngu people is just, it's something that just blows your mind. You're constantly shown just this completely different framework for engaging with the world, and it's just the most amazing process of having your blinkers removed, because you're constantly challenged, you're constantly pulled into the moment, and it's certainly been life-changing for me. And I guess as I've been doing the journey of Hope for Health and being able to bring in, we use a lot of volunteer practitioners and different things like that, and being able to see these dominant culture people come together with Yolngu and share space, and just what that does to the dominant culture people is a really, it's priceless. And I guess what I love about that is that it cuts across so many of the stereotypes that people have, which is so negative. Like, everybody just hears all the negative statistics and all the negative stories from communities, and they don't get an opportunity to see just that amazing wealth and richness that is there, that is just full of all the things that we are craving in the West. And yeah, it's beautiful when people get that opportunity to have positive shared experience together and realize that we need each other. So that's what we want to do with these Together retreats, is create that opportunity for people to come together. And it's a health retreat, so it's completely, immersing yourself in health practices, but it's doing that alongside Yolngu participants who are having that life-saving journey at the same time, but also blessing you with just that experience of learning together and experiencing that different way of being in the world. So yeah, we're really thrilled to be launching that this year.
It looks amazing, and it's such a beautiful thing to actually come up with and work together, and I can't think of better people to be doing it. I remember watching The Magic Pill and then seeing photos and imagery of Pete Evans and Nick up there, and doing, I'm not sure what you call it in Aboriginal, but the forehead and nose to forehead and nose, and being in each other's breath, and just watching that exchange between the cultures, and like you say, coming together. Can you tell us what was the biggest and most amazing outcome of Magic Pill, and has it had any great has it had a great impact on what you're trying to do through Hope for Health?
Sure. It was a beautiful process to have Rob Tate come and film that retreat. He was a real blessing on that journey. I guess it's really thrilling to have our story being told. You know, we've kind of been floating around in the middle of nowhere, very under-resourced, and I guess it's beautiful when there's this pathway that we've been given that is really powerful, and it's a really powerful story that's unfolding and growing, and it's a joy to be able to share that with the world, because it's just been such an incredible blessing the way people respond. You know, it really I think people have been wanting to connect with and contribute to something positive to bless Indigenous people and their health. You know, I think people are genuinely troubled and deeply concerned by the situation. I mean, it is horrific, the statistics that are going on, but it's rare that people are actually shown that there's something positive that you can connect with. And I guess, we have been very dependent on donations right from the start for this work. And I guess it's been such a privilege to have people contributing to our work, because they don't just give money. You can feel that sense of people coming on the journey with us. And that's been really special, because Yolngu are all about connection. You know, that's the biggest gift that they have shown me particularly. I mean, their entire society is structured around their kinship system, which is basically this interconnected web of relationships. So you have a relationship term for every single person in the society. And if you don't directly know what that is, you can easily work it out by mapping through the relationships. So there is nobody that you're not connected with, and those connections are really clear in terms of what those relationships are, what the responsibilities are, what the obligations are, what that connection means. You're so grounded in this web. And when people, when dominant culture people connect with Yolngu, they adopt you into that system, because they kind of don't really know what to do with you otherwise if you don't fit into that system, because that's the system that kind of dictates how they respond to you and how you fit into everything. So yeah, connection is so at the heart of everything that they do. And I guess it's been beautiful to feel that connection growing broader and broader, and with the audience that's able to hear our story. And I guess it gives us hope that we together are going to be able to impact so much more, because that's the reality. It's by coming together, it's by realizing that we need each other, it's by realizing that corporately we have all of the wisdom, all of the experience, and all of the resources, if we can come together to really make an impact on this space. And I feel like this is really, it's a timely thing. The situation in Indigenous communities is already horrific in terms of the constant funerals, the backlog of funerals waiting to happen, and we haven't really seen the start of it yet. Really, the people that we're losing now are people who were blessed to be eating traditional foods when they were in the womb and in their childhood. And, the generation that's coming through now have not had any of that foundation. So people are getting sicker, and they're getting sicker much younger. And so this is a chronic disease epidemic that is going to, we have not seen the beginning of it yet. And that's, for me, that's heart-wrenching. These are people who I know and love, and who are starved for information and opportunity to turn this around. So it's so amazing to have a positive pathway that can speak into that and really bring hope. And it is very real hope, because we have people who've been through this process who know that there are decisions that they can make that impact their health, who see a pathway there and have hope and want the rest of their community to be on that pathway with them, and are working hard with us to make that a reality. So hope changes everything. And it's we certainly intend to keep building this network of people that can connect with this and understand what's happening, and that we can do something to turn it around.
I'd like to just put a little bit of perspective here, that the Australian Aboriginal people and everything you've said, I'm sitting here absolutely twisting in my seat. Tears have been running, because I feel like we've destroyed an amazing culture. But we've not only destroyed the Australian Aboriginal people's culture, but the white people too have lost their culture. Mm. And as you were saying, we're looking for connection, we're looking for community, and that, and I actually see that on social media as people find their tribe. Like the Australian Aboriginal people had tribes, they had groups. So that's one thing I think we need to put into perspective, is that you are paving the way, and not only showing the Australian Aboriginal people this, but we're looking at the whole of Australia. And I've read The Greatest Estate, and I've read Dark Emu, and I've read The Oldest Foods on Earth, which are all about the Australian way of eating, the Australian Aboriginal people's way of eating. And I look at what's happening at the moment in our country, and in the lakes of Menindee and the Murray-Darling Basin, and the death of the fish. Over thousands and thousands, there's probably millions, and they're saying some of those fish are 100 years old. And the way that we know that this great estate of Australia had been governed by the Australian Aboriginal people for, they say 65,000 years, but they're even putting it to 110 to 120,000 years. And we've come in 200 years, we have absolutely destroyed this land. And I want the Australian people to wake up. And having you is like having an angel on this podcast.
Oh.
Because I hope you have woken more people up, because I'm, at them all the time about organic foods and regenerative farming and eating the way our ancestors ate. And in a very short period of time, you have showed the devastation that is happening in a community, and very eloquently. So first of all, I wanted to thank you, and I also wanted to put this in perspective for white people.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I really admire what you're doing.
I think, sorry, you go.
Do you feel a frustration? Or are you feeling light at the end of the tunnel? I've looked at your website, and I've looked at this as a generational thing that you're doing. It's your husband's father that started this, or they started this together. And no doubt your children will carry this on. Do you see are you frustrated, or do you see hope?
I definitely see hope, and I guess I can contrast that with how I felt. So we lived in community for 5 years before Hope for Health started, and I definitely felt hopelessness in that space. I think it took me almost those 5 years to actually be convinced that Yolngu had no idea why they were all dying, and that's pretty. That's a pretty intense reality to be in, this intense funerals and death and sickness, but confusion overarching all of that, and to me that is hopeless, because you're in so much pain and grief, but there is no pathway, there's no direction or hope, and I would see people often, I guess when you're in a situation where you don't have information, it's very easy to over spiritualize things. I totally believe everything has a spiritual dimension, so I don't want to under spiritualize things as well. But I would hear people blaming cultural factors or spiritual factors or different forces purely because they didn't have anything else to pin it on, and they were all very disempowered responses that were all things out there that they could do nothing about to impact anything. I guess the main times I've felt hopelessness, I mean, early on in that process when we were trying to find funds to really kickstart what we were doing, and we had some incidences of funds that seemed like they were going to come through that then felt short. That felt really, really hopeless, because it was I kind of felt like I don't feel like I can keep being in this situation, seeing what needs to happen and not being able to get on with it. And I guess it's hard to sometimes convey the power of what was happening around me, because I was seeing people change on the inside, and that's not necessarily a very easy thing to communicate to somebody else, that that you've actually impacted what people are feeling and believing about themselves and their place in the world. And that's just a real thing. It's really tangible. And I guess there's lots of times where the people we've been working with have particularly times where we haven't had a lot of resources to come alongside people, and they maybe get off track and aren't going very well, particularly when a lot of stressful things are happening in the community. And it's easy to feel a sense of, are we making any progress? Are we getting anywhere? But to come alongside those people and see that they have hope, they have direction, they're still wanting to be on that path and wanting to get back there, and they are drawing more people to that path. I just can't walk away from that. It's too real, it's too tangible, and I guess I'm just so thoroughly convinced that Yolngu people matter. That they matter. Our world needs them, and the knowledge that we are losing as they die, that matters. Like that is a desperately just awful loss for our world. We need that knowledge. We all need it. Yolngu people need it, and we in the dominant culture need it. And I just feel so privileged that I've had that opportunity to learn some of that and have that speak into my life and my children's life. And you know, that shouldn't just be for me, you know, that's what our country needs. And I guess, I'm not going to give up on that, because I feel like we've been given this gift of this pathway, and I intend to follow through on it. It certainly hasn't been an easy path, but I'm so encouraged by how much goodwill is out there, and how much, you know, that just amazing people with such amazing skills and passion, they want opportunities to channel that into meaningful things. So I've got something meaningful they can channel it into, and it's really exciting when that can connect. I guess it's also easy to be frustrated by just how many resources are going into things that aren't working, and things that are never going to work, and even seeing things backfire that have such good intention, and, you know, maybe look good on paper. So I guess, you know, our formula is much more about being together in that space and finding a way forward. You know, it's not something that you can, you know, we want our model to be replicable, but it will never be, you know, a set of tight formulas to be executed, because it's about being together, you know, in the mud and finding a way forward. And when something fails, you find a new way forward. You know, that's the only option there is. So yeah, I guess I have a lot of hope from just the tangible impact I experience in the relationships with people that I have, and also a lot of hope in the growing community of people that are, you know, seeing how important this is and willing to get behind it.
Good to hear. That's what we need to hear. Being in Arnhem Land, have you come across the food larder? I met a young girl. I was one of the 100 Women of Influence, but I think you should be named the number 100 Women of Influence.
Oh, that'd be crazy.
But I was put in that, and I went to the dinner, and I met this amazing young girl, and I think her business was called the Food Larder. And what she was doing in communities was creating greenhouses where they could grow their own food. This one particular one, there's a whole documentary on it, but this one particular one was, or this community was one that was isolated by water for food. And the only thing they had was a shop. And the food that was brought in there was like soft drinks, white bread, you know, cookies and candies, and, you know, all of the stuff that we know is creating ill health in our community. Or what do you call it? What do you call us? The dominant
culture.
The dominant culture, you know, in the dominant culture. I love it. The Australian Aboriginal people in the dominant culture.
Yeah.
You know, and I know that there are people out there doing things, but it's not coming back to us. It's not. We're not hearing, like I only heard about what you're doing, and the three of us only heard about what you're doing through Helen, beautiful Helen Pattern, who's a good friend of the three of us. So
I mean, there are so many important things that are going on out there. And I mean, I think just firstly, it's really important that those things are able to connect and able to happen in the right sequence, I guess, because I guess there's no question that there are issues in community in terms of like access to foods and you know, local production of foods. There's no question that those are issues, but I guess they can never be solved by outsiders, and they can never be solved without there being something changing on the inside of people to understand why that would actually matter, why you would put the effort in to grow something as opposed to buy that thing from the shop. So it's real, you know, we found that to be one of the most startling things about this process, is that you just give people this experience of health, and they're suddenly demanding skills. They're demanding to learn how to cook. They're demanding that more vegetables are in the shop. They're demanding to learn how to grow their own vegetables. So it's beautiful when that motivation can be being sparked from the outside. And that then if we can bring those resources and skills to meet those needs, that's when it's really powerful. Because I do, like I said, I think collectively we have all the knowledge and experience and resources, and it's about coming together. And I think it's really important what you're saying about that story being brought back to the dominant culture, because, things are far too polarized. We don't realize that we're all part of the same story, and we are. It's, that there is no solution here that isn't together. And I think Yolngu people particularly are just insanely gracious that they, despite everything that's been done to them, they still hold so firmly to a belief that together we can be greater. And they want their frameworks and worldview and language to be acknowledged and validated and made useful and relevant. And they know that will make our society greater. And we're not seeing it for what it is. We're not valuing it. And yeah, it's that's our loss so thoroughly, but we can't afford to keep not seeing it, because it's not going to be around forever if we don't start valuing it. And that's definitely something that's happening in communities where that knowledge isn't being valued by the younger generations, because there's just so many messages bombarding them, telling them that their culture is primitive and irrelevant and not of any value. And so we really want to make that a reality for people, that that Yolngu people matter, their knowledge matters. It's not something that's just a romantic idea that's really nice and we should just preserve it. It's actually life-saving, life-giving information that we desperately need in the dominant culture. And we want to be bringing that all together so that we're not just trying to preserve Indigenous culture for its own sake, because I don't know, it's not being seen that it's actually life-giving to us in the dominant culture, that we really need that information.
Yeah. Can we just change track just a little bit?
Sure.
Can you give us a day in your life?
So do you mean a day in my life in community, or a day in my life where I am right now?
Let's do a day in your life in community.
Sure. Gosh. So I guess one of the things that, so we spent 8 years living in community full time. And that was really intense. I think the biggest word you can use to describe life in Arnhem Land is intense. It's so real. It's and you just never know what is going to come at you. So anything that you have planned is not what will happen. I guess so my working community was mainly focused around supporting the women that had been participants in Hope for Health, whilst also trying to keep the program going in the background in terms of funding and raising awareness and stuff. So I guess that's thoroughly impacted by what's going on in their lives. Very often plans are made that get sideswiped by a death. So that's you would very rarely get through a week where that doesn't happen. So generally a hearing ceremony will happen where it's announced who's passed away, and then a lot of ceremony and grieving follows that. I guess the language space is a massive thing to kind of be reckoning with in community. So I mean, I always try really hard to be in the Yolngu domain, the space where people feel comfortable using the language that they feel comfortable using. So that generally means that I'm constantly chasing my tail to understand everything that's being said, and and keeping up and getting lost in all of that, and half understanding everything. So yeah, that's a reality that's pretty exhausting as well. And I guess the beautiful thing about life in Arnhem Land is there is much less of a separation between work and life, in a sense. You know, when I practiced as a doctor, by design, you never kind of crossed paths with your patients in normal life. Like that was a very separate domain, and you had a very separate professional relationship with people. So I guess it's been really different in my work in Hope for Health, particularly because it emerged from the space of my personal life. I mean, technically I wasn't even working at the time when that happened. I was at home with my 6-month-old at the time, full time. But, in community development, that's all a bit of a blur. That's kind of the real space where things can happen. So I guess it's been so different to be in this domain where that's more of a continuum, that these are relationships that are part of my life. So I might need to catch up with a particular participant, and the chances are that I'll run into them when I'm just walking through the community somewhere, or I've just gone to the shop. And so half of your work and scheduling kind of just happens on the fly in that kind of context. And I guess it's such a different framework when, you don't need to kind of sit and do a consult to catch up on what somebody's been eating and how they're going, or what's affecting them in their life, because you're actually part of most of those things. You're sharing space, you're sharing meals, you're aware that particular people are sick or someone's died in their family, or things like that. So there's much more of a collision of those worlds. And I guess part of the gift of that is that I then get to bring my family into that space as well. So it's always a juggle of, having young kids and just the space that takes up in your life and energy. But that's, our eldest boy, Eli, this has just been his life. He had his own workshop materials to deliver nutrition education to whoever would listen, and considered himself part of the team. He definitely still considers himself part of the Hope Health team. So that's been really beautiful, that kind of blurring. It was really hard when we needed to step back from the ground, and part of that was out of necessity for the project in order to be able to, raise more awareness and invest more in the back end so that we have a strong foundation to build the program on. When you're in community, it's very hard to remove yourself from that intensity, because it's really unrelenting. And, every week you think, oh, what an intense week, as if there could never be another week that intense. But every week is that intense because people keep dying, people keep getting sick, really gross injustices just keep happening. And it's really hard to divorce yourself from those when they're people that you know and care about, and they're affecting the community that's the space that you're moving in. So yeah, we have at the beginning of this year relocated to a retreat centre in rural Darwin to really invest in that foundation, and it's been wonderful to have more energy to connect with dominant culture people that want to hear this story and want to come alongside us. It is always heart-wrenching when we do go back to community, because I guess I realise my privilege in that I can come and go from that. But for Yolngu, that's their reality, that's their world, and they can't, step outside of that. They can't cut off from it.
We're coming towards the end of our hour together, and I would say that there will be people out there that will want to know how they can contribute to Hope for Health.
Awesome.
So let us know what they do, how they get there, how do they give their money, or how can they help, or in other ways, because I know that Helen goes up there, and Helen's asked me to come up there too. So let people know how they can help.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I guess, it was interesting. We did a Facebook Live when we were last in community with some of our beautiful Yolngu ladies, and I took that question to them, and it was so beautiful because the first thing that Yolngu always talk about is about relationships. So I guess I love to always start there, that is what is important for Yolngu, that they have people journeying with them, and that's what we want, is to be growing this family that are journeying together. And obviously there's really tangible ways that can happen too. So, you know, we are a really, really small team with a very, very big vision, and we don't have a lot of resources. And so when you do donate, it really makes an impact. It enables us to fly, you know, amazing naturopaths like Helen Padron out to community to do consults and come alongside people. So we've just spent 10 days out there, you know, investing in a little mini retreat in the community to reset people and get them back on track for the new year. And that was just such a gift to be able to share that time, and it makes an impact. And, you know, people don't have access to anything outside of a mainstream health clinic. There is no access to any alternative or preventative healthcare outside of that. And we in the dominant culture just have such a wealth of tools and resources available to us, all in our own language. So we want to bring the best of, you know, what our health and preventative healthcare has to offer to this population that we need to value so much, and who are suffering more than any other population in our country. So donations are a huge thing. We do have volunteer opportunities, particularly at our retreats. So where, you know, we use volunteer practitioners to deliver our retreats. So naturopaths, massage practitioners and osteopaths, as well as help in the kitchen and things like that. So that's a really tangible way to get involved. I know that we often don't have as many spots as people would like. So, but that is something that we are wanting to invest in a framework where we can be delivering these retreats regularly. And I guess that's partly what Together Retreats are about, is that we're trying to look at different ways to make this model accessible and impactful to the biggest network of, you know, audience that we can. So the Together Retreat model, the dominant culture participants pay for their own spot, and they also sponsor a Yolngu person to participate. So then that journey happens together. So everyone is investing in their own health and paying it forward at the same time. And we're just so excited about that, because we know that it's just going to magnify the impact, because we need each other and we need those opportunities to share time and space together. And we need tools and frameworks to be understanding ourselves, understanding each other, and then we need an opportunity to actually live that knowledge. So the Together Retreat program has a 2-month online prep course that we do together to really dive into all of that stuff. So then we can dive into 2 weeks immersion together with the Yolngu participants and really live it, really experience it, and, you know, that it's not just theoretical practical stuff. It's immersion in all of those health practices, but also immersion in that cross-cultural space where, you know, it's the grey zone where we mix and mingle and we get to exchange. So we're so excited about that. And yeah, so we've only just got the word out about Together Retreats. So we really want to spread that word far and wide and give that opportunity to dominant culture people to just really dive into this and learn and experience and become part of the family in that way. So we're really excited about that opportunity, and we really hope that that can be a pathway that can regularly deliver these retreats for Yolngu people, because they're life-saving, and you know, we're wanting to explore all the different ways that can be a viable thing for us to deliver.
Oh, it sounds wonderful. I'll make sure that I put on the show notes where they can go and what they can do in order to learn more about you. Read that fabulous book about why warriors lie down. So I'll make sure that happens. But what I'd like to just finish with myself is, I've learnt two major things from you. Number one is that we've been lied to, and about the Australian Aboriginal people, and I think Australian history needs to be rewritten and changed and not be English dominant, but perhaps really understand the culture. And I think that would, number one. The second thing that I've learnt from you is that we can learn from their culture more than we are doing now. We can learn how they manage this land. We can learn how they manage their bodies, how they figured out what food was right and how they had to prepare it, and, you know, when to eat. I loved that. When a flower bloomed, you would eat a fat, stingray. I didn't know that. So I just feel that, number one, we've been lied to. Number two, we can learn a lot from this beautiful culture that you're speaking about. Kim, what about you? What are your two takeaways from?
I've been in awe listening.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And, for someone like yourself with a medical degree, but also who's gone through her own incredible pain with losing your son. I think I remember you saying that at the beginning, and how you have turned that pain, or maybe used that pain, to support other people, let alone a whole culture in pain, has made me realise that there is hope for the human spirit to completely rise above our individual pains in order to make a difference. And the difference you're making, Karma, and what your husband and your family and then beautiful souls like the ambassadors. I see you've got Nora Gagardis in there. You've got the beautiful Pete and Nick. You've got Narelle Chenery in there from My Essence. You've got just, Pete and Nicole and Nick. And I just think it's wonderful that there's a lot of people out there with good following that also believe in this project. So I think my first take home is certainly that through our own pain, we can project support and help other people through their pain. That's something I've taken from you. And I think the other thing is probably along the same lines as Cindy, but in my opinion, if it's been only a short period of time that we've almost decimated the health of this culture, then surely it's only a short amount of time that we can turn it around again. So my wish and my hope is, from what you're saying and with the impact and how people like yourself are doing this, then my wish and my take home is that then I hope that we can be a part of that in helping you to turn this around. And it's not a culture that's asking for help. It's not a culture that's saying we're weak. It's a culture saying, I think in Cindy's words, we've kind of been lied to. So, let's do this together. They don't seem like they're blaming or getting angry, but they're crying for help in a more energetic, spiritual way. So they would be my two take homes. And I feel very, very blessed that we've had you on the show. And I can see why Helen said to get you here. And I guess we're finishing up. I would love to know, what are your two big take homes, and what would you love to leave our listeners with from the place where you're sitting?
Oh, Kim, I love what you just reflected on there, because it's, to me, we don't get to choose what our story is, but we all get these opportunities to learn things that I think can be gifts to the world. And I feel like I really only learnt that one in hindsight, that I was able to look back on just the horrific few years of infertility where we were battling and looking for answers, and the hope that we were able to find and work through. I can actually really feel gratitude for that journey, because I had no idea what that would enable, and that enabled me to have something to give to the world. And I think we all need to look at our struggles a little bit more in that light, and see them as an opportunity to, learn the real stuff. It's the stuff you live that you can really embody and give to the world. And I feel so privileged that that has been able to lead to Hope Health and Together Work. And I'm really excited about seeing what that can do. And I really I'd love people to reflect just as you did then on that you know, the role of those painful things in your life, and how you can transform them into something that's impacting. Yeah. And I guess the other thing that's really really just central on my heart is just the value of traditional cultures, and that we have been given such an inaccurate picture. And from what I have experienced, you know, my mind is just constantly blown and expanded by this otherness, this completely different way of looking at the world. And we're so stuck in such narrow paradigms, and it's easy to feel hopeless because you can't see anything different, because we're not thinking anything different. And the gift of otherness, the gift of a different perspective that's from a completely different framework and vantage point, and what a gift that is. And I guess I really want us to realize in the dominant culture that this isn't a story that we're separate from, that it's not these Indigenous people far away somewhere else that I can't see, and that's not impacting me at all, that, you know, we are actually all part of this same story, and that we do have an opportunity in this nation. It's not too late. You know, we haven't completely decimated this culture yet, and we still have an opportunity to turn that around and change that story. And rather than feeling, you know, ashamed of the statistics that we have in our nation in terms of our Indigenous people, and ashamed of how they're being treated, and, you know, that we have an opportunity to change that, and actually realize the value and wisdom and knowledge they hold, and that we can be proud of that, and proud of that being integrated into who we are. So I really, that's what I'm going to keep working for.
You know, as I'm listening to you as well, and I know that I've been pretty quiet because I have been just taking in everything that you've been saying today, Karma, there are two things that have really stuck out for me. And the first one is that I find it so heartwarming, sad, but also heartwarming, in that, you know, those who are and I don't want to say victims, because I don't see the Aboriginal people as victims, but they certainly have suffered at the hand of white people and the way that we have treated them. So I don't think we can ignore that. But what I love about this story is that no one is looking for pity. No one is feeling sorry for themselves. And also nobody is feeling animosity and anger and hatred at the hands of what's been perpetrated against them. In fact, what they're looking for is healing. And to me, that speaks volumes. To the second takeaway for me is the culture and the spiritual connection to the land, to one another, to life, to oneness and harmony and unity. It speaks volumes to what they know, that we are only now just discovering and beginning to appreciate, as we're starting to realize that our Western culture and our Western way of seeing the world doesn't work for us, because we're bigger, fatter, sicker, and dying sooner than what we've ever done before. And finally, there are some trailblazers that are willing to look into other cultures to find the answers to effortlessness that we have been seeking since God was in small pants, but haven't found it, you know. And I think that it's so beautiful to see that the Aboriginals are so interested in being a part of a collective, which I think is so beautiful. And I love that there are people like you who are being the link between us and them, and creating that oneness, rather than there being this void of misunderstanding. So hats off to you, girlfriend. Congratulations on the work that you're doing. Thank you for being a part of today's podcast. And I think as we bring this show to a close, you've opened the eyes of everybody that's listening to this podcast. And I'm so excited to actually start to see some of the feedback that we got on our Facebook page from today's podcast, because I think there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be cheering you on and feeling a little spark inside of their hearts ignite, with curiosity as to how they can be a part of this and participate, because I think there are more of us that are interested in harmony with our Aboriginal brothers and sisters than what there are those of us who are interested in separation. So thank you. for the work that you're doing. You're amazing.
Thank you so much.
So for all of our listeners today, I just want to say a big fat wow. I hope you guys have loved listening to today's show, and you've gotten some things that, like I said, have really sparked your heart with curiosity for what these incredible people bring to our lives, the richness and the information that they can share with us. We are blessed to have Indigenous people to this country that are willing to share themselves. So I say hats off. So thank you so much again, beautiful Karma. And for all of our listeners, please listen to the podcast again and extract some more gifts and post your questions on our Facebook page at allthews.facebook.com/up-for-a-chat. You can also post your comments and your questions at allthews.thewellnesscouch.com/up-for-a-chat. So for all of our listeners, Karma, before we sign off, is there a way that our listeners can follow you or find you and track your journey and what you're up to? Do you have a website and a Facebook and Instagram?
We do. We have all of the above for Hope for Health.
Hope for Health. So Hope for Health on Facebook, Hope for Health on Instagram, and hopeforhealth.com.au on a website?
That's it. Absolutely.
Magical. Thank you so much, my love. It's been a treat.
Thank you. Thank you.
So everybody join us here next week on Up for a Chat and become part of the ripple effect that is really changing the world. And we are so going to see you on the ride. Bye for now, everybody.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.